Hello everyone, today I'm here with Tristan Wade. We are going through a hand that he played the other day in a $3,000 Freezeout tournament at the World Series of Poker. You like Freezeout tournaments?
Love them.
Why?
Because you don't have to rebuy. You don't get to rebuy. There's one tournament life. You can apply pressure. You can force opponents to be a little more aware of what they're doing. I wish all poker tournaments were like that.
Yeah, and the good thing about Freezeouts is that all the good players can only play one time. Typically, though, whenever the good players play a tournament with re-entry, they can re-enter as many times as they can, knowing, to some extent, they're going to have some small positive return on investment. You know where that money comes from? It comes from you. It comes out of your pocket and everybody else's pocket, which results in everybody's return on investment being very low in non-Freezeout tournaments. But in Freezeout tournaments, if you're much better than your opponents, you're going to have a very big edge. Now you can only play it once, so you can't invest as much money. But if you're good, you're investing less money, but with a bigger edge. And that's especially good if you don't have a giant bankroll. But we're living in the re-entry period of poker.
Unfortunately.
But in the World Series, there's still some Freezeout. So let's take a look at this hand from a 3,000 Freezeout. Folds to you. On the button, you have a solid 65 big blind stack. You open it up with the A6 offsuit, but then a short stack with only 20 big blinds, opts to call. Okay. You think the short stack's going to be shoving every time here? Or do you think he's going to have a pretty wide calling range?
Pretty wide calling range. Should be shoving all their small pairs. Bad offsuit aces that just want to win the pot. Three betting some good hands. Could have some traps here, but not really going to be trapping sevens through queens that much. Maybe even kings. So
you presume this opponent's going to be playing well?
Well, playing well, yes, absolutely. This was a Brazilian pro player, and very good player. I assume they're going to be playing well and defending their big blind very wide here.
Okay, as they should.
Yeah,
what
a
lot of people do wrong in this spot is they just shove or fold. But if you look at our GTO charts at PokerCoaching.com, you will see that you actually have a pretty wide calling range here of all sort of suited stuff, medium, okay, offsuit hands.
Even just one high card, low card hand, you're getting good price against a wide range from the button, so you want to get in there.
Yes, you're calling a lot.
Yeah.
All right, flop comes 8, 8, 7. Pretty good for the opponent's range, I suppose. They're going to have a lot of 8s and a lot of 7s and a lot of draws. Yep. But they check, and you go for a small bet. 2 big blinds.
Yeah, I got ace-6 offsuit, so I have ace high. I can just have the best hand. I can win the pot now. And the cool thing about my hand, even though I have an undercard to the board, is I do have some backdoor interaction with the 6, 7, 8. So that allows me some flexibility moving forward in the hand when I do bet.
You know we're not playing 3-card poker. 6, 7, 8 is not a good hand.
It's not a good hand yet, but ace high is a good hand.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So the 6 with the ace high allows me some room to maneuver moving forward.
All right, and I agree. And this is a spot where if you bet 2K and your opponent folds much of anything, it's fine. Because everything they're folding has some equity, right?
Absolutely.
So whatever. If they can fold for 2K, great. Now, your loose, aggressive, battling Brazilian opponent pops in a little check raise. You really don't want to get check raised in general, especially when you have the ace high and only the 3-card straight.
Right.
But if there's ever a player you may get a little bit splashy against, it's going to be the players who you presume are going to be check raising aggressively and who know how to play a 20 big blind stack well. This is another spot where a lot of people screw up in the opponent's shoes by they either check folding, check calling, or check shoving. But you should actually have a small check raising range here with a lot of draws, medium pairs, like a 7, some nuts, and that's going to put the continuation better in a pretty bad spot with all their hands like this ace high and king high and 2 overcards.
Yeah, it's one of those situations like they know I'm going to be betting this flop. I know they should be check raising this flop, both in wide situations. So that's why I then can proceed with ace high, because I understand my opponent should have some really bad equity hands. Maybe not bad equity, but bluffs that I'm beating, I would like to say. And then obviously they can have some check raises like 9, 10, 6, 9, maybe even 4, 5 with a backdoor here goes a little goofy. Whatever. So yeah, it gets a little dicey, but when we know both have wide ranges and both should be aggressive, that's where we get.
Yeah, this is a spot where on 8, 8, 7, the opponent really just wants to have some sort of backdoor straight draw, some sort of backdoor flush draw, or overcards to the 7. And there's a lot of hands that have some of that working.
Oh, yeah.
And the question is will your opponent check call a lot of those and not have a small check raising range, or will they check raise with them? When you see your opponent check raising small, and you know them to be a good, strong opponent, yeah, they could be doing it with only nuts or pairs, but they're probably mixing in with a small check raise size with some draws as well. And right here, the ace-6 actually beats a lot of draws because your opponent should not have a whole lot of ace-high in their range to begin with because they would either shove it or re-raise it before the flop most of the time. So you decide to splash around 3,000 more into a 17,000 pot. You need 19-ish% equity.
Yep.
It's kind of hard to not realize 19% equity. Now, if we were all in here, you would obviously call, but you have to realize you're not going to realize all of the equity that you actually have in this hand, because in reality, I don't know how much equity we have, but probably something like 35, 38%, right? Like a decent number. But we're going to have to fold out our hand if our opponent just like bets turn and jams river, right?
Yeah.
So we're not going to realize all of that equity. So you can't just look at how ace-high does against your opponent's range of pairs, three-of-a-kinds, and draws, because you don't realize all of your equity because they're going to make you fold by the river.
And what Jonathan means by realizing your equity is you have to get to the river, get to showdown, they turn their hand over, you turn your hand over, and you see who wins. And like Jonathan's saying, that's not going to happen all the time because you're going to face a turn bet and a river all in or what have you. So
Sometimes.
Yeah. Sometimes.
That's the hard thing to weigh, is that you don't really know if you knew your opponent's always going to bet the turn and jam the river, maybe you just fold immediately.
Yeah.
But sometimes they're going to check it down and you win, or you're going to spike a ace or a 6 and you win.
And the other thing about my range in this spot is I have all the strong hands here of overpairs, like, nines through aces. So I can just play those the same way I might play my ace high. So if my opponent is bluffing, they got to worry about me having some good hands too. So that's one of the things going for when I float in position here with ace high.
Yeah, a lot of people think if you had aces here, you just want to rip it in, but definitely not. If you have aces or an 8, you're definitely wanting to call because your opponent's drawing thin or dead, right? And yeah, you let them draw to their 4 outs or 8 outs, however many outs they have to their straight draw, that's fine. But a lot of time your opponent's going to have just jack 6 of diamonds for random not jack 6 of diamonds because you have the 6, but, jack 5 of diamonds for random overcard backdoor flush draw. They're drawing pretty much dead.
Which has no showdown value, jack high.
Right, and they're going to feel inclined to bluff it, right? Mm-hmm. Which means, yeah, they're going to make your ace-6 fold, but they're going to pay off your overpairs massively. So this is a spot where you want to make sure you're calling with a lot of your continuing range. All right, you call, turns to 9 of spades, which is pretty god-awful for you. It
is. It is pretty god-awful because those hands that we mentioned, the 9-10 is now, very good equity here. 5-6 gets there, which I block, but still a lot of offsuit combos of that. And whatever other, Jack 9, Jack 10 now makes the nuts, more or less.
So every logical draw just improves to beat you. But also, some of the junky draws, like Jack 5 of spades, just turn a straight draw and turn a flush draw, and they're going to feel inclined to bluff.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
So I mean, give them, I don't know, Queen 2 of, no, not spades. There's not 2 spades on the board. My brain's broken. I thought there were 2 spades. If it completed the backdoor flush draw, it'd be even worse for you because then they'd have more hands that could easily bluff. This is actually not so bad because now those backdoor flush draws are just garbage.
Right. We do have the luxury of being completely rainbow here, but still the 9 is a little problematic because they do have a lot of 9x in their range here.
Yeah. So your opponent checks now, and I would start to think they now have a lot of 7s and a lot of 9s probably, because 7s and 9s are kind of the same hand, right? They lose to overpairs, but they have a lot of showdown value, and they're not all that susceptible to being outdrawn. A little bit susceptible, but not super susceptible, I suppose. You always want to ask, like, what makes sense to check? It's either total garbage, which you're crushing, or it's some very clear showdown value hand that is never folding that you're behind.
That they now might want me to bluff, and they can use it as a bluff catcher.
Right, like if your opponent's sitting here with a 9 or a 7, they're probably not planning to check fold it. And you're going to check, or they check, you bet, they just call it off, and then you get it in drawing thin, despite the fact that they have one junky pair, right? So this is a scenario where I think a lot of people don't really realize how hand values work. Because usually one junky pair is not all that good, but when you're playing shallow stacked in an already big pot against somewhat wide ranges, one junky pair is actually okay. Yeah. Like your ace high here is actually okay. Not when the 9 comes, but before, right?
And the other thing is we have like a 1-to-1 stack to pot ratio here. So that's kind of interesting when you get to the turn. Like, what are your thoughts here when you have ace 6 and you're now 4-liner against a range check raising like that? Do you think you have enough value to just realize your equity to check the river, or do you think we should turn this into a bluff now and try to get a 7 to fold?
Well, the problem is that I have to presume he's going to keep betting with any open-ended straight draw, right? So if he has a 10 or a 6, I got to presume he's going to keep betting. So when he doesn't bet, it means he doesn't have those open-ended straight draws, which means he has either a pair, like we said, which is not folding, so I don't want to put money in against that, or some just total garbage, like Queen 2 of backdoor flush draw, that's just giving up. And against both of those ranges, I don't really need to put in much money. I mean, maybe you could put in a tiny bet if you know it's going to make your opponent fold the queen two.
Right.
If they're never going to check shove the 10-9 or whatever, but a lot of people will start shoving out of position against tiny bets, as they should. So I would just check it back, see showdown, realize you're actually not going to win this hand all that much because they're going to jam river a lot.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to fold out your ace high when you miss. But I think that's probably the best course of action because I do think if the opponent's good, they'll have a lot of hands that just aren't folding turn. And that's really bad for you.
And we don't want to be over bluffing in this spot where they're likely to call. So these type of hands should fall into the category of let's just take our ace high value to the river.
Yeah,
basically.
if you had a less amount of showdown value, say you had queen six suited instead, then I'd be more inclined to bluff that one because that one's not going to win at the showdown quite as often as ace high. And I realize queen high and ace high aren't actually all that different, but they're just enough different.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I'd be more inclined to shove less showdown value hands or hands that just have more equity with, like, say we had queen jack for gut shot, 2 overcards, and queen high only.
Yeah.
That's a hand that maybe I would feel pretty inclined to shove if I called the check raise with queen jack of backdoor flush draw, turn to gut shot.
I like that.
That'd be a hand that I would almost certainly be shoving. So we have plenty of logical bluffs. When you have plenty of logical bluffs, if you use all the hands that could bluff, usually you're going to be over bluffing, and that's a problem if your opponent's going to call off adequately. And I do think a lot of people are going to be structuring their ranges such that they're going to have a lot of 9s and 7s here, and they're going to be calling off adequately.
Mm-hmm.
All right,
said.
So check, river's a 10, you make a straight. They put it in.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a pretty easy call at this point. We've made a straight, but I think it also takes just a little consideration here. I mean, it's not like the bet's that big. It's a pot-sized bet, but our opponent could still have a lot of the Jack X, could maybe have had some, full house combinations, but we've made a straight. Like, we have to call. But I just think there is some merit to considering this spot if, we were deeper or what have you. The ranges might be a little more tight.
Yeah, if they shove for like 3x pot on the river or something like that, then it gets much more dicey. But pot-sized bet against a capable opponent who will at this point maybe even turn some junky pairs into a bluff, thinking that they're trying to get you to fold out slow played over pairs.
Yep.
Or, like a random 9 that you spiked, right? Imagine the opponent does have a 7 and they decide to check raise the flop, which they probably should. And now you have a 9 with, 10-9 or ace-9 or something like ace-9. That's a hand that you're probably going to feel inclined to fold against the river shove. So I think this is a pretty logical spot where the opponent should be bluffing a lot. And when the opponent should be bluffing a lot, you can't go around folding straights.
Yeah. And that's basically it. I mean, nothing else to
Don't
say
fold
here.
straights.
Yeah.
All right. You call. The opponent does show. A very logical hand. 7-4. I think if flop check raise is perfectly fine and reasonable. I think checking turn is perfectly fine and reasonable. And I think using this one as a bluff is also perfectly fine and reasonable.
Yeah, they just really got unlucky on this run out that I made a value hand, and they got a lot of money in with good equity. I called them with ace high,
except on the river.
Except on the river, yeah.
I will say
leading up to the river.
This is a spot where maybe the opponent just wants to fold preflop. 7-4 offsuit is a pretty marginal hand, and anything on the bottom of a big blind defending range is going to be roughly break even in general. Now, when you're playing in a freeze-out tournament, you're playing with at least a medium stack here, so it's not like you just started the tournament, or maybe you did, I don't know, who knows. But you want to ideally not play the hands that are barely profitable from out of position, because the GTO chart presumes you play perfectly from out of position, and a lot of people don't. Now, to be fair, your opponent actually did, I think, play as well as he possibly could out of position in this hand, but I don't hate folding out stuff like 7-4, 7-3, 8-4, offsuit from out of position against a cutoff raise. Against a button raise, maybe you can defend, but especially as the ranges get stronger and stronger you're defending against, these hands just don't play all that well out of position in any scenario. So be careful. Maybe you can fold here, but if you're going to play it, I love the way the opponent played it, and this time it worked out for you.
Once again,
worked out. Once again, it works out for Tristan. Sometimes everything just works out for some people.
What can you say?
Congratulations with all your success in life. I'm so happy for you.
Thanks.
That's me for today. If you enjoyed this thing, what are we doing? What's this? This is a show.
Yeah.
Make sure you follow Tristan. Check out Tristan's work. We'll put some links in the comment section below. He's very creative. Tristan creative.
Thanks, Sean.
Good luck. Have fun. Click the like and subscribe button. Click the notification bell. And we will see all of you next time.